What makes one financial advisor better than another? Mason was recently asked, what makes Frederica Wealth Advisory different from any other firm? And it got me thinking about how my answer to that has changed over the last 31 years. When I first started in the business, I probably would have talked about investments, performance, research, or maybe the tools that we have. And today my answer is very, very different. Because after 30 years of sitting across the table from families, I've learned something important. The things people think they're hiring us for are often not the things that they end up valuing most. Most good firms have access to quality investments. We all have the same Apple stock and most of the same mutual funds that we have available. Most can build diversified portfolios. Most can run retirement projections, discuss tax strategies, and coordinate your estate planning. The gap between good firms is much smaller than many people realize. So what does separate one firm or one advisor from another? And it's the people, not the software, not the products, not the pie charts, but the people. Years ago, a client called me after her husband had passed away, and she wasn't asking about investments or the market. She simply said, "Buddy, I don't know what I'm supposed to do." That call had nothing to do with portfolio management, beta or alpha or standard deviation or anything like that. She needed someone who knew her family and could help her make the next step after that, and that's financial planning. Another client sold a business he had spent decades building. When the deal closed, millions of dollars arrived in his account, and everyone thinks that's the finish line. In reality, it's often the starting line. Suddenly, the questions are much bigger. How much can I spend? How do I help my children without spoiling them? How do I make sure the money lasts? What am I supposed to do now that I've spent my whole life building something? Those aren't investment questions. Those are life questions. And that's where relationships matter. I remember another client during a particular financial crisis. The news was frightening. Every headline predicted disaster and doom and gloom. He called and said, "I think we should sell everything." And we spent an hour or so talking. And this was not about charts, not about forecasts, but about discipline and fear and staying focused on what matters. And years later, he told me that phone call was one of the most important that we'd ever had, not because of what we bought, because of what we didn't do. And I've seen families struggle with inheritance issues as well. One family loved each other deeply, but money created tension. One child needed help, another was successful and independent. The parents wanted to be fair, but fair and equal are not always the same thing. We spent months working through those conversations. There wasn't a spreadsheet that could solve it. There wasn't software that could solve it. There was listening, asking, questioning, and helping a family communicate. Again, not an investment problem, a people problem. And then there are transitions nobody really talks about. Retirement is not always easy. One client spent 40 years building a successful career. He couldn't wait to retire. 6 months later, he called me and said, "I think I've made a mistake." And not because of money, but because he'd lost his sense of purpose. We ended up talking more about life than finance. Volunteer work, mentoring, family, travel, writing a new book, a new chapter in his life. One of the biggest misconceptions of our industry is that clients hire us because they want better investments. That's certainly part of it, but I think many stay because of trust. Think about who you call when something happens, when a parent dies, when you're thinking about retirement, when you're selling a company, when your child inherits money, when you receive an unexpected windfall. You're not calling because you need a mutual fund recommendation. You're calling because you need judgment, and judgment comes from people. Financial advisors are similar. Competency is required, but competency alone is not enough. Clients aren't just hiring me, they're hiring our whole team. The person who answers the phone, the person who follows up, the person who catches an issue before it's a problem, the person who remembers the details. Those moments rarely show up on a performance report, but they're often what clients remember the most. Nobody remembers what the market returned in a particular year. What they do remember is who showed up on the porch when something went bad, who helped when a spouse died, who answered the phone during a market decline, who coordinated with the attorney, who made a difficult situation a little bit easier. That's what people remember. So when someone asks what makes us different, I don't spend too much time talking about investments. Not because investments don't matter, they absolutely matter, but they're only one part of the equation. People choose advisors for competence, but they stay because of trust, because relationships, because consistency, because someone knows their story. And after more than 30 years, I've come to believe that's the real differentiator. Not the software, not the portfolio, certainly not the logo on the building, but the people sitting across the table. The investments matter, the planning matters, but eventually every client reaches the same conclusion. They chose the people.